the basis of my whole life. And I would desire for everybody to know and have this experience that I have had, and to know that God is real and that He is love and joy and the incredible life I've had from that moment on. And that's the story I would share with the world.
Well, welcome to the podcast. This is AudioLife, where you tell your story in your voice. I am your host, Ashley Marks, and I want to welcome our guest, Sharon Purcell, to the podcast. Sharon, thank you for joining us on AudioLife today.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Yes, and let's get started on your story. My first question, if you were to share one story with the world, which would it be and why?
The one story that is most important to me is happened about 40 years ago. I had a life-changing experience where I came to know that Jesus was real and not just a figment of my imagination. And my life from that time on was changed. And it was a life of faith in God because I knew He was real. And because of that, I would share that particular story because it's so important to me. It's the basis of my whole life. And I would desire for everybody to know and have this experience that I have had. And to know that God is real and that He is love and joy and the incredible life I've had from that moment on. So that is incredibly important, and that's what my life is all about. And that's the story I would share with the world.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great. Can you maybe share some details of that if you want? How you were introduced, or who, if there was someone important in that realization and beginning journey of your faith?
I was speaking with my sister, my older sister, and she had already had this experience. And as she was talking about what her life was like and what she had gone through, I began to feel the same. I began to understand what she was talking about, and it was very dramatic because I suddenly felt like I knew that Jesus was real, and I hadn't before. So it was through my sister talking to me about her experience and wanting me to have that same understanding. And it just happened, and then it took off from there. And I never looked back, as they say. And it's been the focus and my whole life has been based on knowing Jesus and following Him and having this incredible life that I can never explain it really, except to say that anybody that I come in contact with, I would pray that they would have this same experience because it's a life of joy and a life of love. So that's pretty much as much as I can tell you.
Yes. Yeah, that's wonderful. And so I love that you'll forever have that bond with your sister, not only being your sister, but you have that extra because you never forget that. Thank you for sharing that. Are there tales from your family that have been passed down through generations that you cherish?
Yes, there are tales. My mother's side of the family had a particularly an impact on me because they had been living in Hamilton to begin with. My great-grandfather they lived on the mountain, and my great-grandfather built a road up that mountain so that they could get to their house. And they called it Beckett Road, and it's still actually there in Hamilton. I think it's called Beckett Way now, but the road is still there. Mm-hmm. And my grandfather's family were the Becketts, and my grandmother's family were the Baggetts, and they were neighbors, which meant that they lived not beside each other, but maybe a mile apart, because it was that generation where there was a lot of land and big houses and so on, and big farms. Mm-hmm. And there were 4 brothers and a sister in one family, and 4 sisters and 1 brother in the other family. And 3 brothers married 3 sisters of each family. So my grandfather married, who was a Beckett, my grandfather was Alfred Beckett, and he married Genevieve Baggett. And then there were 2 other brothers and 2 other sisters that intermarried. So there were all these marriages and cousins that came from those 2 families. Then my grandfather, that was pretty interesting in its own way. Then my grandfather went out west as a young man and homesteaded, and which meant that he was hacking down the trees and so on in the prairies and planting wheat and all of that. And at that time, the government offered people that homesteaded, they offered land for a very minimal amount of money. I think I couldn't tell you, but that's why he went out there to do that. And then, so he got his land, and then he brought his wife out, and then they started a family. And that family was my mother and my uncles. And so they had their life out in the prairies, and that was pretty interesting. And then after the war, the Second World War, my grandfather moved back or down east again. And he and my parents, so my mom was married at this point, bought a piece of land and built a big house in Lorne Park out in Ontario, and lived together. And so they each had an apartment in this house, or a section that was their own part. And so I grew up knowing my grandparents in a very close way. And I value that relationship very much, because they were very interesting people, and my grandfather had all kinds of hobbies and things that he shared with us. And my grandmother was also very interesting. She did ceramic work, and she did baking and candy making and all kinds of different things. Mm-hmm. So we had all of this interesting life with my grandparents. So that's and all of their brothers and sisters that already lived down here. So it was a very strong family connection, and lots of stories and lots of sharing of their lives with us. So that was very important to me. And, consequently, yeah. I whatever has made me the way I am, I'm passing on to my kids. So it's kind of interesting to think about that, because I was made, part of my personality was created from having this relationship with them, and then I've passed it on to my kids. So that's pretty much what I wanted to say about Tales. They had so many stories that I couldn't go into them, but it's just the story of the generations that have impacted me.
And you had cousins to play with.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Cousins, and
that's fun.
Great. My uncles, my mother's brothers, very, very fond of them, and they've all passed away, but their children are still here, and so we're connected that way.
I love that. That sounds so beautiful. Just a lot of land, and you can run around, and I can picture it in my mind, what that would look like. People don't have grand yards as much, like acres and acres, so less likely. So that's lovely. Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. Tell us about an unforgettable adventure or mischievous act from your younger days.
Okay, so I was
Or both.
This was pretty easy for me to remember or to tell about, because I was a pretty daring child. I would not hesitate to climb trees and all of that kind of thing, or just wander off. And because at that point we could, Mom would just say, go out and play, and we could play anywhere in the neighborhood. And it was, and we explored and did all kinds of kind of dangerous things. But I wasn't sissy-ish. And people that I knew that would warn me about doing things, I figured they didn't know anything, but I did. Or they didn't really know what they were talking about, and I didn't care. So one of these friends, one friend of mine, her name was Anne, she and I were out in the woods walking along and hiking, and she said to me that I should stay away from a certain plant, which she thought was poison ivy. And I thought it wasn't, so I just said, I said, oh, don't be so, whatever, ridiculous, or whatever I said. And I took the plant and broke it off, the leaf off, and I think some white sap or white cream came out of that stem, and I just nonchalantly wiped it all over my leg and just told her it wasn't poison ivy. But then, of course, the next day or a couple of days after that, I broke out in a terrible rash all over my legs, and it was poison ivy.
It's a hard way to learn.
I had the worst case of poison ivy all over my legs. And so I still didn't, it didn't really dawn on me that what I had, just kind of poo-pooed what she had said. I think I just had to get through the whole horrible few weeks of scratching and trying to get through it. But nothing came from that. Like, Anne did not come back to me and say anything about that. It didn't really change me that much. The next incident, which was similar, was a time when another friend of mine, Brenda, and I were skating on a pond, and she warned me. There were two ponds, one was draining into the other, and she warned me not to go too close to the drain where the water was coming in, because it was dangerous. And I didn't really think it was, so I did go closer than I should have, and the ice broke and I fell in to the water. And it was extremely dangerous, but I managed to scrape myself and just grab the snow or ridges of snow or ice or whatever and pull myself out. It was a very foolish, dangerous thing that I'd done, but that's the way I was. So those stick out in my mind, because I was a kid that just thought I knew everything, and I didn't want to be a sissy or there was something about my personality which just said, oh, don't be ridiculous, and I just went ahead and did it without being sensible myself. So those stories, when I think about them, I was pretty reckless, but there you go. I lived through them. So
there you go. Yeah. As long as when we grow older, we just learn from it.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, I've had that. Yeah.
I probably warned my kids.
Yeah, that's scary.
I probably warned my kids more than I should have about things, because I think it eventually sank in.
Maybe that was the reason. Yeah, exactly. That is scary, though, the ice story. That's really scary. This is about memories. Are there memories linked to specific songs or fragrances or flavors that instantly transport you back in time?
Yes, absolutely. My family was fortunate enough to have a cottage that my father bought when I was about 6, and we still have it today. Mm-hmm. And I'm 74 years old, so the cottage life that we experienced as kids. I came from a large family, 6 kids, and my mom would bring us to mom and dad took us up to that cottage every summer. And then my dad went back during the week to work, and so he would come up on the weekends. So we had this incredible experience every summer for 2 months of living in this wonderful beach country and a beautiful lake and river. And so, and then we had no TV out there, no phone. It was a beautiful time to just get to do things that you didn't do when you were in another atmosphere. And so we did a lot of, I listened to a lot of music. We did hiking, swimming, boating, and playing cards, reading a lot in the evenings. So when I hear music specifically, my mother had a collection of records, and we brought them up every summer, and I would listen to operettas and musicals and a lot of orchestral music. When I hear, especially the operettas and musicals, I think of The Cottage, and it connects me right away, because it was one time that I really focused on that kind of thing, and was able to just in the evening just sit there and actually just listen to the music and do nothing else. So it really sank in. We also had a piano there, and my mom would play and we would sing around the piano, and that any of those songs, when I hear them, of course, that brings me back to that kind of to that part of my life. And then I took my children up every summer, and we went through the same kind of thing. So that was incredible for me. And
you got to take your kids back to the same cottage?
Yeah.
To the cottage. Oh,
yeah, wow. It was wonderful. And I treasure that. And then so any of that kind of music that I hear, as far as food or fragrances, so food, I would connect with Christmas, of course, which is, and the music of Christmas. Again, we had a piano. My mother would play. We would sing around the piano, and we would always make shortbread and mincemeat and fruitcake and all of those kinds of things. And then I was able, again, with my children, to have that kind of singing around the piano life, which I so treasure, and I'm so glad that happened. And then, of course, one of the biggest selections of music that would connect me with my kids and transport me back, and even to my childhood, was the Nutcracker Suite and the ballet. So we listened to that and watched it, and my son played it on the piano, and it was just a part of our life. So, and I would take my kids to the theater in Toronto where the National Ballet danced it. So that's a huge, huge thing.
Yeah, I love it. I love the artistic way that you guys spent time together. It's beautiful. Weaved into the whole experience.
Well, and again, it goes back to my grandparents and their influence, and my mother. So it's interesting. And now I'm seeing it with my grandchildren. So it's really going on and on, because I want to share that with them. So it just keeps going. So I've already started them watching Nutcracker Suite. And they're quite young, so they watch a little bit of it. They're hearing it when they get up and dance around. So it's pretty nice.
Yeah, I love that music can just it just could be passed down from generation to generation. It's just one of those things.
And now for a word from our sponsors. Ready to share your stories and life philosophy, or capture those of a parent or grandparent? Or maybe a corporate package is right for you to build connection across your workforce and add value to your clients. Visit AudioLife.io today to learn more. Our listeners will get 10% off using discount code GIFT10 and order number AudioLife Podcast. AudioLife, where memories find their voice.
Can you recall a particularly challenging phase in your life and how you navigated through it?
Well, I would say to begin with, and I'm going to bring another example into this, but I would say to begin with that being a young mother and having bringing up children is challenging, and you're developing as you're going along, as you're training your children and bringing them up, you're developing at the same time, you're growing. And I found it to be an amazing experience, very challenging, but then I think every mother does, and I value it. I value that experience. I would watching my children grow up and help trying to nurture their lives in different ways and teach them what I felt was important and allow them to get to a point where they could take off themselves. And now I see my kids are just amazing. I look at them and I think, I can't believe they were just wonderful to begin with. And I was kind of, going along with what I had to do as a mother, but I think they just developed amazingly on their own. I'm just so blessed by it because I just look at them and I think, wow, these kids are amazing. And that's one thing. And another is totally different. So as far as challenging, when I was a child, we had a house fire in our house, and we had my grandparents and 6 kids and my 2 parents all had to get out of the house in the middle of the night.
Oh.
I know it was, and we actually had to jump the kids who were, I think, my sisters and I, we were sleeping on the top floor of this house, the 3rd floor, and my parents were, and my baby brother. And we had to jump out of a window, which was, I don't know how, it's the 3rd floor of a house. So it was quite high. And my uncle was on the ground and he caught us. And we escaped from the house that way. And then after that, the house pretty much burned down. And so everybody got out. We had to be taken care of by neighbors and friends. And so the whole family separated. That was challenging. I remember to this day, I think I was about 8 years old at the time. And it was difficult to be separated from the family and to understand that, just to get used to another family, living with another family, and then to be able to relate to everybody. We came from a small community, so it was hard everybody was following me around at school and, asking me questions. And it was very strange and difficult at that point to get used to all that. But we made it through. And as far as the bravery goes, I think I would say Mom and Dad were brave because we were just kids. We just followed what happened and did what we were told, did what we had to do. But Mom and Dad lost everything and they had to start over again. And it was, and they did it. And the community and the church and all of our neighbors and so on, they all pitched in and helped. And that was incredible. But it was definitely a difficult time for my parents. And being 8, I wasn't aware of the huge difficulty that they were going through, but I did feel a lot of strangeness in my life. But we got through it and lived. Everybody lived, and we built the house up again, and that was that. So that was huge. It's not something that happens to everybody.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, yeah, and just to see how you said your the community gathered around, you got the family.
Yes, it was beautiful.
Just the unity that can come from that. But yeah, I'm sure that's very strange. And thank you for sharing.
And I know now because I have faith in God. I know that He protected us, and because we woke up in the middle of the night with this terrific smoke coming up to the 3rd floor, which was suffocating. You couldn't breathe because of the smoke. And the fact that we, actually jumped out the window and my uncle actually caught us, and all of these things that happened, I know that we were being protected. And even though I didn't know what was happening, I know that God was protecting us at that time. I know that now.
Well, yeah. At the time, I'm sure, you're not thinking, you're just reacting. Well, yeah, it says he is the protector. So,
Yes.
well, you kind of touched on this, but you may have another one, or we can move on. This one is share a story where you or someone you know displayed remarkable courage or triumph against the odds. So obviously, you just shared a huge story.
Yeah, I guess I jumped into that question.
About
really,
that.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, kind of leads into it, but that I can't think of anything greater than.
Yeah.
So we're going to go into family and friends and bonds section. And the first question is: recall a family event that stands out for its warmth, laughter, or unexpected occurrences.
So I didn't have an answer for that as far as one event. I pretty much thought of the cottage life and what that was, what that whole experience meant to me, and the fact that when we think about the warmth and the laughter, it was an unbelievable way to bond with my brothers and sisters and my mother, who looked after us during the week, in ways that you don't normally do, especially when we went back to our house and we had a phone and we had TV and we had our friends and we had school. It was a whole different life. But when we went to the cottage, there was nothing except playing cards with my brothers and sisters, reading, and the music. And then every day we went swimming. Every day or many days we went hiking and boating and playing together. So that life that we had in the summer, which I now treasure because it meant so much warmth and laughter and just, being in a situation where we had no other resource except our brothers and sisters, and that made it wonderful. And then when I grew up and my father passed away, so I would take my mother there in the summer. That just dawned on me. She took me as a child, and then I took her back every summer, and then my kids. So they had the same experience, and so that for me is huge. And that as far as warmth, that cottage life is what warmth and laughter means to me. So
yeah, yes, and it's nice without any distractions, and that's wonderful. So share a heartwarming story about a friend who stood by you at a time when an unexpected bond was formed.
So I could not really answer that question because I have had a very close friend growing up, but it wasn't a situation where she stood by me, but I did have a very close friend from grade 6 up till grade 13. And then after that, when we left high school and went different ways, we still connected at times. And she was a very dear friend to me, and we did everything together. There wasn't a time when I had to have somebody stand by me, so I couldn't really answer that question in that way. But she will always stand out as being a very big part of my life. So I think that's all I can say about that. We grew up together. We grew up through our teens together, and that was a big thing, and I valued that. So
yes, it's nice to have those friends. Which story or memory do you often share with younger generations and hope they remember?
And this is again a question that I didn't have an answer for it, because except what I would pass on to my children and my grandchildren is my life of faith. That's and what that means to me, because that's how my life is led now. So it's not some kind of story that I would pass on and hope that they would remember and learn from it. It's really what my life is all about. When I came to know that Jesus is my Savior and that He died for me, then everything in my life changed, and everything is based on that. That's what I want to pass on to my children and my grandchildren, is that Jesus is real. I have a personal relationship with him. He is God. He died for me, and everything comes from that. So that's what I would pass on.
Yes, your faith. Yeah. Can you give an example of how that changed? I mean, you've kind of touched on it, but maybe like specifically how that changed you as a person or your outlook, or
It's a life of faith in God and who he is, which you learn from reading the Bible and going to a church that is a Bible-based church and teaches you. But basically, the Bible tells us who God is, and it's a matter of reading that and finding out who he is, and then living your life based on who he is and how he guides you through your life now. So it's a life of faith, as opposed to trying to do things yourself and trying to use your own abilities. I still use my abilities. I still am my own self in that way, but I'm transformed in a way, or conformed in a way, to becoming what God wants me to become, which is lined up in the Bible and talked about in the Bible. And so you live according to what the Bible says instead of what the world says. And that's really, really not something people want to hear, because they think it's I don't know, they don't, because the world teaches you to live and have your own rights and try to do your own thing and be, all the things, the good things that you should be. But the Bible teaches us to trust God, and he will teach us how to live and what to be like, which is like him. So we are brought to a place where we learn to know what Jesus, or who he is, and to conform to that image, which is amazing. We are told in the Bible that we are made holy as he is holy, which is amazing to think of. So it's a life of joy and of love. It's challenging. You come to know throughout your life how God is leading you, and to trust him more and more, and to have faith in him, and to know him and love him more and more. So it's an amazing life to live.
I kind of put you on the spot there. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
I'm
glad I could.
Let's see. Are there lighthearted or profound tales that encapsulate the essence of the life you've lived?
Lighthearted tales. Again, I'm going to just go back to family life. I think that my family, as it was growing up, I distinctly remember sitting around the dinner table and laughing all the time as we ate dinner.
Cool.
And my older brother would, if I would drink water, quite often he would play tricks on me, like put salt in my water and things like that when I wasn't looking. And I would drink it and spit it out all over the table and those kinds of things. So he was always playing jokes, or trying to do things that he would do over and over. But I would never realize that he was doing it, even though he would do the same thing. I never got wised up enough to think about it. I would just let him do it. He would just do it, and that would be it. So we would laugh a lot. We had a lot of similar interests as children. We were all into athletics, and most of us were into some kind of art or music. So we had a common bond there, and so we grew up just being a very happy family. And I think that is, now I see that family is a big thing that I value so much, and my children and my grandchildren. And I realize that is so important to me. I would never, ever give it up. I would never have wished for anything else except to have children. I had a chance at one point to have a career, and I valued staying home with my children at that point and decided to do that, and I'm glad I did it. So to me, it's the family and passing on to them what is important and what I value. So I'm not sure if I really answered that question properly, but that I don't have a lighthearted story. I just want to say that family is what is important to me, and I'm so blessed to have my 3 children, Judah, Carrie, and Elise, and then my grandchildren, 5 of them, and that's what's so important to me. Mm-hmm. And my extended family, my brothers and sisters, and everybody else. It's just wonderful. So, mm-hmm. And I'm a grandmother, and I love it.
A lot of love. Yeah. It's fun. Looking back, is there any story you've shared that gets recounted differently depending on who tells it?
I don't really have a specific story that I can think of. There are times that my brothers and sisters and I have talked about our past, and they've had other things to add to the stories that I didn't realize. And I think it was just because they were in a different place than I was. Or they've just remembered it different. They've remembered more than I did, or they've remembered it differently. But there hasn't been a specific one story that's been passed. This is the question was, is there a story that has gotten changed? Is that right? Or
yes, recounted or changed depending on.
I think especially at my age that. So I have a sister who's 4 years younger than me, and she has said things that I had not understood had happened, but I was at the same place and the same happening, but I didn't realize what things that she realized. But they weren't big things. It wasn't one specific story that's gotten changed a lot. It's just being our age and remembering things differently. So
yeah, that's fine. Describe a recent incident or observation that made you smile or reflect on the beauty of life, which I know you touched on a few of those.
Yeah, I'm going to tie this one in with what the question was. Was there something that just happened in a perfect way, or with the stars aligning, that kind of thing, way back in the beginning?
Oh, yeah. We can go back to that one. Describe a time when the stars seemed to align a moment. Perfect time.
So rather than saying the stars aligning, I'm going to say that I understand as a Christian that there are no coincidences. As I live in a life of faith, I understand that God is ordering my life. So I'm going to tie the two questions together. And so the incident that I'm going to refer to is meeting a man who came 2 years ago from British Columbia. And his wife passed away, and his children lived here in Ontario, so he moved here. And then he looked for a church to go to, and then in that church he looked for a seniors group, and he joined that. And then because he was a singer, he started helping out with the music. So the whole incident of this man coming all the way from British Columbia to Ontario, to the same area I live in, and finding the same church that I attended could be looked on as a stars aligning or a coincidence. But we both understand, his name is Larry, and I understand that God brought it all together. So rather than the stars, I'm going to say God brought all of that together. And he joined the seniors group, and he was already doing the music when I joined later on and met him. And since I'm actually a singer as well, so he and I started to do some music together, and so that's another thing that lined up. And then we started to share coffees together, and then it went on from there. So at this point we are now engaged. So it's a matter of looking at the whole, not thinking, this just happened, but this was something that was lined up. Every incident happened accordingly, because he could have picked any other church, he could have picked any other seniors group, he could have done any other thing, but he didn't. He did the same church that I already attended, and then a seniors group, which I wasn't even part of at the time. So it was all brought together by God, and And then we got to know each other and fell in love. And so here I am today, engaged. And when I mentioned earlier I was about to go back, or I was about to actually go on CBC, that's in the future, because he wants to go back, and not to live, but he just wants to go back to visit. So I will have a chance to see British Columbia, which I've heard so much about from many, many Canadians. And it's living in Ontario is quite a distance. You may not realize it, but I think it's maybe 4 days of driving if you drive, something like that. But nobody really wants to drive it. But it's a long way. It's on the other side. Well, it's on one side of Canada, and I'm in the middle beside Quebec, but I'm still several provinces away from British Columbia. So he came here, and as far as being the last question being, does it bring a smile to my face? Yes, it does. Was it lined up?
Absolutely.
Was it something that was lined up? Yes, and happened in the timing. Yes, it was lined up by God, and it does bring a smile to my face. And so his name is Larry, and we're getting married in February. So
that's coming up
this February. So that's my answer.
Are you getting married where are you getting married? May I ask?
Well, in the area that I live in, there's a very old church, and we're going to get married in that area because it's got a lot of history, and it's a lovely old quaint town. So we're getting married there, which is in the Niagara region, just so you can place it. So Niagara region is in around Niagara Falls, but if Niagara Falls is about a half an hour drive from where I live. So we don't usually go there. Okay. We just live in this Niagara region, which is wine country, and the escarpment, which is a big it's a big area that was carved out by earthquakes and so on, and people hike up the escarpment. It's like a big mountain. So this is the area that I live in. It's called escarpment country or wine country, if you want. So this is where I live, and it's pretty fun.
Well, so lovely. Yes, that does sound fun. As we conclude, is there a piece of advice wrapped in a personal story you would like to leave us with, basically?
Well, again, it goes back to my salvation experience. And so personal story is that my life was turned inside out, upside down. My whole life is based on God and my faith in God, and the fact that he saved me from a place that I was in, which was without him, and brought me into a relationship with him. And I would want everybody that I come in contact with to know this kind of life. So that's what my life is about, and that's what I want to share. So that's my last little. It's not anything that I've done. It's all God, and he is everything to me.
Sharon, I just want to thank you for being on AudioLife and sharing all these beautiful memories and stories with us. And thank you again.
Well, thank you, Ashley. It's been quite an experience.
A good one.
But you've been very easy to talk to, and so thank you so much.
That's so nice.
I may have rambled a little bit. I'm sorry?
I said that's so nice to hear. You did not ramble at all.
Well, no. That's very good, because I tend to.
If you like what you heard today, consider recording your own AudioLife private podcast or giving one to a loved one for a unique and memorable gift. Today, AudioLife listeners will receive 10% off using discount code GIFT10 and order number AudioLife Podcast. Also, remember to rate our show and subscribe so you'll never miss an episode.